Hello and welcome to another edition of the RoadHub International podcast, hosted by me, Gideon Ewers. I'm the editor of RoadHub International. This edition, I'm actually in Mesa, Arizona, just east of Phoenix, and at the headquarters of MD Helicopters. And my guest today is none other than Ryan Weeks, who's the president and CEO of MD Helicopters. Ryan, thanks for sparing me the time this morning and letting me come out and visit you guys here in Mesa.
Oh, you're welcome, Gideon. Thanks for coming all the way from the UK.
You know, it's an interesting time for you guys here. You've got a lot of stuff going on. There's been a little step up in activity, then a quiet period, and then this little surge. And that surge, I guess, is driven... this morning, apart from we've seen the Jordanian customers flying circuits on their acceptance trials, but there's some other stuff going on in terms of offerings to the wider customer base, of existing customer base, in terms of upgrades.
Yeah, as we talked a couple of months ago, one of the things that we're spending a lot of time on right now is coming out or releasing a bunch of fielded fleet upgrades for the aircraft, performance upgrades. And what that's all about is, when I joined a few years ago, one of the things that we started doing was visiting with customers. We went to the New Zealand fly-in. We started going to fly-ins and asking them, what they need from MD in addition to just better availability of spares, parts, and repairs. And there was this constant theme of, for 20 plus years we've been talking, MD's been talking about these upgrades to the D model, to the E model, to the 520N. Can we get that going? And so I came back here to MD and talked to leadership and talked to engineering and said, hey guys, they want a C30 engine in the D and they want, F model performance out of the E. Well, what do we have? And as it turned out, going all the way back to Hughes Helicopters, a lot of these different configurations had been conceptualized 40 years ago. We just didn't do anything with it. So and part of the reason an OEM can be reluctant to do things like this is it arguably might cannibalize new aircraft sales. But we're at a point in time that, with new aircraft sales being much lower than a Bell or a Robinson, it puts us in a unique opportunity. So we can go after these things and start releasing them. So we put together a game plan and we've started working it, and we're going to be coming out with over the next 12 months or so. And mind you, this started about 7-8 months ago, so it'll kind of be an 18-month stretch. We'll be coming out with over 10 fielded fleet performance upgrades, which I will argue is unheard of in this industry. You just don't see, that many STCs coming out from an OEM because, OEMs have a lot of different things to do. But again, we're at a point in the company's history right now that we have some time to focus on this. So over the course of the next 5 months, we'll be coming out with 3 Super D upgrades, an upgrade for the 520N, it'll be called the 530N, a Super E, which is an E model that gets these same treatments the D models will get. We will come out with options to put a C30 in a D and an E model as is without doing the airframe mods, and then also glass cockpits for the F, the E, and the D. And we also have some other things in store for later on after that. But we think it's an exciting time right now. I tell the company here, especially the engineers, listen, guys, you should be incredibly excited about what we're doing here, because you just won't get this opportunity again over the course of your career to do this many STCs
in one hit. It is kind of unusual, as you already alluded to, that OEMs can often be reluctant to do that, because why would you do that when you could go out to... I think that was certainly the reaction a lot of people had, when the E to F program was announced a couple of years back. Saying, well, why would you do that? You're competing with yourself. But there is that latent demand, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, definitely. And so, but especially with the Ds, you raise a good point, because we're going to come out with a Super D20B, a Super D20R, and a Super D30. And the designations at the end are a reflection of the engine that's in the aircraft. And basically what you'll get in the first one, we've completed all flight testing on the Super D20B. We expect to get that STC in roughly 3 to 4 weeks, and then we will start selling kits to our network. And I'll come back to that point on the E to F upgrade. And so on that model, you retain your engine, but you do some upgrades. I'll call it the airframe upgrades. You get longer F-model blades, main and tail. You do a mod to the tail boom. You get a new vertical, a new horizontal, and you get that 8-inch extension on the rear of the aircraft to move the gearbox back. Mm-hmm. So those are all basically F-model treatments. That takes your max gross weight internal from 3,000 pounds to 3,350. And the list price of this upgrade out the door with labor from all of our service centers around the world is $350,000. But it gets a little better than that. Those assets that come off of your aircraft, your blades, your vertical, your horizontal, they may have a lot of time left on them. Mm-hmm. We were in the UK a couple of weeks ago at a UK fly-in, and we were talking with a D-model customer who has a C-20B engine in their aircraft, and our service center over there took a look at his aircraft. Skytech is the name, mm-hmm. and they basically said, it looks like the parts that will be coming off the aircraft, because your main rotor blades are basically brand new, is in the neighborhood of $150,000 to $180,000. So what that means is this individual could he could increase his max gross weight by 350 pounds in most conditions, and even more at higher elevations and hotter temperatures for $180,000 to $200,000.
Yeah,
that's not much more than just a set of brand new main rotor blades.
Right.
So and going back to the network thing too, on the E to F, we've offered the E to F for 20 years. But we mandated that customers send their aircraft back here to MD, which is, it costs a lot, it takes a lot of time, it just doesn't work for a lot of people around the world. So a little over a year ago, we said, that's maybe not the smartest move. From a business standpoint, it doesn't help with the volume, the number of kits we sell. And from a customer standpoint, it makes it difficult for them to get into the upgrade. So we decided to allow 4 or 5 of our top service centers to start doing that upgrade, and away we went, and we saw volume pick up right away. So as we rolled into this plan for all of the Super X's, I call them, we're going to let all 34 of our service centers around the world offer these upgrades, perform these upgrades. We will basically put the kit together, we'll send it to them, they'll do the upgrade, it lowers cost, it lowers the amount of time it takes to do the installation, it makes it closer to where the operators are, and we hope that that's going to help us get this out to the field, much faster and more easily.
Yeah, and it's that whole thing, the whole downtime, cost and downtime thing you just talked about, If you're a 500 operator in Austria or even Australia, the logistics of getting that aircraft back here to Mesa for that kind of work is prohibitive. Clearly prohibitive.
Yeah.
And the idea of being able to take it to the guy that they would do the heavy maintenance on the aircraft anyway, obviously makes a huge amount of sense. And I guess you're getting that kind of reaction from the customer base. For example, the guy you were just talking about, UK guy.
Yeah, and in the UK, there's one F model in the entire UK.
Yeah.
So there were about 30 MDs that showed up to this fly-in a couple of weeks ago. One F model. There is one commercial operator in all of the UK. Everybody else is really just an enthusiast, right? So it's predominantly C models, D models, and E models. And, these folks are all looking for performance improvements to their aircraft. And similarly, in New Zealand, where we have roughly 106 MDs in a country of, just that size, they're huge enthusiasts. There's only one F model in the entire country.
Right.
So, these guys have been looking for us to soup up their rides for a long time.
Yeah.
And so we're finally in a position where we're able to do that. And we're looking forward to it. We're looking forward to making them happy. They get very excited about this. Now, when I went back to New Zealand a few months ago, 2 years later, they were asking about how these STCs are going, but they were also asking, what's next? Are you going to add some more performance?
More ways can we find
right.
to pimp our ride, right?
Yeah. And we have some in our back pocket, and we'll likely begin those around the middle of 2026 after we've released all of these.
All of those, yeah, and that progression onwards. So yeah, I mean, it's still an awful lot of stuff to be pushing through. The exercise of getting those STCs, these ones, this current batch, as you say, it's been an 18-month progress by the time you get
to the end
end of this batch.
Yeah,
and then it's on onwards and
Yeah.
upwards, I guess, from there.
But we'll be averaging, if all goes to plan, roughly one every other month once we get this thing rolling.
Yeah.
And the FAA, they've had a lot of change in personnel over the past few years, and a lot of people are newer. And we have a very good FAA partner in our the Los Angeles office. And when we did our final testing on the Super D20B a couple of weeks ago in California, I don't know the exact number, but based on the pictures, there were 6 to 8 representatives from the FAA that came out just to kind of witness what was going on, how we were doing it. And now that they're becoming more familiar with this process, as frankly our team is too, because we haven't done anything like this in a long time, we firmly believe that these successive projects are going to move a lot faster. There's going to be more familiarity. When we go from the Super D20B, which this week, now that we've filed our final paperwork, we're swapping the engine out and putting in the C-20R.
Yeah.
And as soon as the 530N flight testing is done, we'll take that test bench out and put it in the Super D20R and do that work. Well, now that they've already done, us and the FAA, the Super D20B, the Super D20R is just going to be a repeat. And then when we get to the Super D30, you're basically just talking about a round nose F model, literally. A round nose F model. It has all the performance of an F model coming off the line. And going all the way back to what kind of started this long exchange, could it cannibalize F model sales? It could, but based on a study that we did years ago when I was with one of the other OEMs, we looked back at all of the new aircraft buyers and owners over the previous 40 years. As it turns out, only about 33% of helicopter operators have ever purchased a brand new aircraft. Yeah. It's mostly a used car market.
Yeah.
So it's kind of foolish for us not to do things to
help
for the used car market, right? They want enhancements. They want to do more things with their aircraft. And once they have a D model that has a C-30 engine in it, now they not only get all that extra max gross weight, but now they can compete in conditions, hotter temperatures and higher altitudes that they had to kind of give up to other F models and E models and maybe other manufacturers, right? Because they couldn't do it. Now they'll be able to operate, at extremely high temperatures and altitudes and, do even more with that aircraft. So
with the same
we're excited about it. The market's excited about it. And, we're glad to help.
I mean, it's one of those interesting things, and I'm glad you said that because it's that whole thing of, well, how many people actually do go out, in that percentage of the market? I've never heard that number articulated. I've often wondered what it was, but I didn't imagine that there would be, that many people because they're just the price points and everything like that.
Yeah.
But it is, speaking of one thing though that could spur a spike in new aircraft build, and we're all, as you know, everybody in the industry is talking about it, is the good old flight school next. Let's scratch that bear and see what happens. So it's a huge program, isn't it? I mean, there's so many aspects to it.
It is. As we've discussed before, and as everybody's talking about, the U.S. Army is looking to replace its training aircraft, and they've decided that they want to go with a light single aircraft, and in most cases a short light single aircraft, right? For a lot of reasons. They're looking to make it, they need an aircraft that's easier to train on, that people can learn on effectively, and that speeds up the training too, because their goal is to put 1,350 students through the program and graduate them each year. And some of the numbers that have been shared is, they want for them to fly roughly 165 hours each to become proficient before they then move on to an Apache or a Black Hawk or a Chinook. And, that's a ton of flight hours. That's 222,000 flight hours per year. And so we've run the numbers, and we believe that, and others who we're working with, we believe that it'll require about 200 aircraft. So, that would be a huge bump to our production, with MD over the last 20 years or so being one of the lower volume manufacturers, unlike Bell or Robinson or Airbus.
But it almost touches on the idea of maybe though, for some manufacturers, winning or being part of a winning bid may actually be, in a sense, a poison chalice because of what they're going to have to say to their smaller orders of customers. You know, it's the old tale, isn't it? So you know, if you or I go down and you know, go down to the car dealer down the road and say, I'm going to buy a fleet of one car, you just join the queue like everybody else. If you go and see and say, I'm buying 50, the world changes quite dramatically.
Yeah, most of the big OEMs have roughly a 2-year backlog or 2 years of orders. So if they were to win this, even if they're making 50 or 100 aircraft a year, we'll all have the same challenge, and that is, can we spool our supply chain up fast enough to make 50 extra widgets per year? That's not a trivial task in you know, the aviation industry because lead times can be very, very long. So for any of us to call our engine manufacturer and say, hey, 12, 18 months from now, can you ramp things up by another 50 units a year? That's a problem for that supplier, like it is for a lot of other suppliers. So we're in a unique position in that we, fortunately or unfortunately, don't have 2 years of backlog. So for us, if we were to be chosen for this program, this would be our primary focus. But as we were talking a little earlier, you know, this amount of volume for an MD would arguably help with economies of scale, and then our aircraft costs would come down, so our price would come down. So that would probably cause more of our, you know, utility operators and police departments and other foreign militaries to come and say, hey, can I get 6, or can I get 1, or can I get 12? And then we're not talking about 50 a year, we're talking about 60 or 70 a year. So it would be a good problem to have.
It's a high quality problem, right?
Yeah, it's like the dog catching the 747. What are you going to do with it?
What are you
going
to
do
with it now? Yeah.
But we're up for the challenge.
I mean, one of the other things with it is that, you know, when we were talking earlier, and you showed me some numbers that the Army shared at Quad A about the projections for the speed of the program, and it's pretty ambitious for any kind of military procurement program, but for anyone getting involved in it in terms of, you know, talking about that spool up in supply chain and everything like that, you know, it's an event horizon that's if that's maintained. I mean, you know, you're talking this point 2 years time.
Yeah, or even shorter.
Or even shorter, yeah.
And so, you know, the timing that was most recently communicated with most of us at the Army Aviation Show in Nashville in May was at the end of July, they're going to have an industry week in which all of the competitors will go down to Fort Rucker, and this is coming up just a couple of weeks from now. And so for the helicopter OEMs, MD, Bell, Robinson, Enstrom, Schweizer, and Leonardo, we'll all have our aircraft there, and there are at least 6 instructor pilots who will take a ride and fly all of these aircraft. So we'll all rotate through them over the course of a day, and they'll all do a series of CAN maneuvers, and then we're hopeful that we're able to show them a few things that we believe and know that the MD product can do because of its design that the other products can't do. They'll be doing the same, of course. And so that we'll see what happens there, but surely the Army's going to formulate some opinions about, you know, the pros and cons of each design and which one might be, you know, a leader, or boil it down to the top 2 or 3. And then, you know, they said the timing after that would be a final request for proposal would be released not too long after that.
Yes.
The response period would be roughly 3 months, and then the Army would spend, you know, up to 6 months studying it. And mind you, it's not just about the airframe. It's about, or the aircraft. Correct. It's about what maintainer are we going to pick. You know, what about logistics? And it's all of the stuff that goes into, you know, running a maintenance or a flight training school.
A flight training school. Because
a big one.
Yeah, a big one.
Yeah.
You know, the biggest one. Anyway. You know, you have to say it. I mean, it is one of those things, and I think it's something that people forget is the scale of U.S. Army aviation in terms as a helicopter operator. I think, you know, I haven't done the numbers, but I wouldn't mind betting it's not far off. Take everybody else in the world, and they're about the same. It's that scale. So I mean, we're talking there in those numbers of 1,300 pilots a year.
Yeah, and they talk about having 52 students per class, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 classes a year. And so, once it gets mature, if you will, whoever wins, once you get your fleet of 200 or so aircraft in there, there's basically 200 aircraft just for the trainees that are in the air every day, each of which is probably flying, 4 different 1.3-hour sessions is kind of the number that everybody uses. And so, that's a ton of activity in the aircraft, and it takes a lot to maintain all of those aircraft and keep them in the air. One of the kind of the numbers, some of the numbers they share with us at Quad A was, and this is part of the reason they're looking to do this one a little differently, is right now they have 18 different contractors, I think that was a number they shared, helping to make this thing work today with the product that they're using. But only 5 of them are under contract. So the U.S. Army doesn't even have formal authority over most of these entities that they need to come together to make this thing work like a well-oiled machine. So kind of the phrase that keeps coming out is the Army is looking for one throat to choke in the future.
Yeah.
They want a prime to step up and own all of this, be responsible for all of the contractors. They would bring everybody to the party. They would be responsible for them and make sure that it runs smoothly. And so, there's a lot of, I call it speed dating, going on right now between all the different participants, from the aircraft manufacturers to the maintenance companies to the primes, talking about who would it be best to partner with in hopes of us winning this together.
And that's kind of one of the interesting dynamics, isn't it? Because it's a movable feast. If you have Prime A, they may be thinking in terms they're speed dating the platform.
Yeah.
That they're going to put into their bid as well. It's not just that. It's not as simple as it appears on the surface. Things can move. A company, Prime S, let's call them, may buy a product from OEM X or OEM Y. It's all that. The same way as building that maintenance capability, because it's a large scale. A 200 aircraft operation is still a 200 aircraft operation.
Yeah.
Especially with that kind of flying rate.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a superlative that sums it up, and I fail completely. But it is that kind of thing, and it's unique. I mean, I don't think there's been anything, a procurement that's been anything like this before.
Yeah, the other thing that's unique about this is, these acronyms were new to me when I heard them, but, GOCO, G-O-C-O, and COCO, C-O-C-O. And historically, the government buys all these aircraft, for example, and they own them, and they have contractors come in, and they provide the pilots and the maintenance facilities and the maintainers and all that stuff. They want to move away from that for the sake of, making things move faster, more efficiently, to the COCO model, company-owned, company-operated.
Yeah.
So basically, the prime, or the collection of companies that come together to compete and win this thing, they will own all the assets, and they will basically charge the Army on a graduate basis. It could go to flight hours, like you pay X number of flight hours and we'll help you get 1,350 graduates a year, or you could just pay by the pilot, but it's more of a pay-as-you-go type of thing. The U.S. government wouldn't own all the assets. So, it's going to require some deep pockets for, the teams that come together to fund this, because, among other things, they'll need to own the fleet of aircraft, and whether you're buying an Enstrom or a Robinson that are a little more towards the lower end of the price range, or something like ours, or the 119 that gets a little higher in the price range, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars just to buy and own the fleet. And then there's all the spares and repairs that go with it. You got to work out contracts with all the companies supporting it. We liken it to being a general contractor building a house.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of the middleman. They're kind of funding it all, running the whole deal, but they got to go find the right foundation company, electricians, framing, roofing, cabinets, all that stuff. And they want to be very wise in their decisions about who they pick, because they want to be seen as the contractor bringing the best house possible to you and meeting your needs. So yeah, everybody's talking, everybody's watching, and we think Industry Day is going to be a pretty big deal for the helicopter companies because it'll help the primes and others understand, really, from a capability standpoint, forget about price, how do they stack up?
Yeah, and that's going to be, I think, one of the interesting developments on that. And it's the thing where, of course, the fourth estate isn't allowed to see, but it would be an extraordinary learning to see what happened, how that washes out the feedback from that Industry Days sequence, and how everyone devolves their ideas of what the front runners might be, and what that looks like after it's next week, isn't it? So
it's 2 weeks from now.
Yeah,
and I'm sure each of the OEMs will have their own story in the media about how they did and all that kind of stuff. And there's probably gonna be positives and negatives for everybody. But from a performance standpoint, like I said earlier, we really think that we're going to have a good showing there.
Sure. Well, like as always with these conversations, I could sit here and talk to you all day, but you do have a company to run. So time is our enemy and has beaten us once again. Ryan, thanks very much for spending the time this morning and having the chat. Enjoyed it. As always, when we get a chance to share some ideas. That's been another edition of the Road Hub International podcast, and in fact, the last one before we take a summer hiatus break. In Europe, they call it the Grand Vacances, and that's what we'll be doing. But we'll be back after the August break with more episodes of the Road Hub International podcast, Season 2. Look for us in September.